taught for 10 years. I was kind of golfing, caddying in the summertime at Chambers Bay. I got hooked up with Justin Thomas in 2010 at the USAM. And Justin and I hit it off, and his best friend back then was Jordan. And the US Junior Amp came to my home course in 2011, and Justin was too old, and so I begged him for Jordan, and he actually didn't give me Jordan. We still have the text messages. He's like, Jordan's gonna win this thing, and just rub it in my face.
Michael Greller, welcome to the Scoop.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
Thanks, what did we go with?
We just went with the mint chocolate chip.
A good pick?
Yeah, it's kind of my go-to.
Are you big dessert, sweets, ice cream guy?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a problem with the sweets.
And before you were a caddy, you were a 6th grade math teacher?
Yeah, 6th grade math and science.
What were you like?
The first 2 days of March Madness are like my 2 favorite sports days of the year. And I used to create the entire 6th grade math curriculum those 3 weeks around March Madness. So, you know, it's like fractions, percents, decimals. And then I could have March Madness on the TV while I was teaching. So it's kind of nice. It was an excuse to watch basketball, and my principal couldn't get too mad at me. So stuff like that I would try and do in the classroom, and I still hear from some of my former students. I saw 2 of them in Phoenix this year. My oldest kids would be, the kids that I taught would be Jordan's age. So it's kind of funny to think about Jordan, you know, if he would have been in my class.
Right.
And it would have been fun to have the roles reversed with him.
Totally. So then how did you end up on Jordan's bag from that?
So yeah, I was pretty happy being a 6th grade teacher. I taught for 10 years. I was kind of golfing, caddying in the summertime at Chambers Bay. I got hooked up with Justin Thomas in 2010 at the USAM. And Justin and I hit it off, and his best friend back then was Jordan. And the US Junior Amp came to my home course in 2011, and Justin was too old, and so I begged him for Jordan, and he actually didn't give me Jordan. We still have the text messages. He's like, Jordan's gonna win this thing, and just rub it in my face. Because you know they were pretty competitive back then, and so he gave me this kid named Gavin Hall.
I am friends with Gavin Hall.
Okay, played at Texas, lefty, played a couple US Opens, great golfer. Well, he broke his wrist like a week before the US Junior playing basketball. And so I got back on the phone with JT. I'm like, just give me Spieth. And so he gave me Jordan, who was still young enough to play in it. And you know, I got the job like literally 2 days before the tournament. And first hole in the practice round, I was on the wrong page. I was so nervous. He was the favorite. And you know, I'm still like, I'm a scrub caddy.
Right.
And he's expecting, you know, the best caddy in Port Orchard or Bremerton, and you know, fortunately for me, he was a #1 junior in the world. He was a stud, and he played great that week. He ended up winning it, and then I was kind of in with both those guys. I did 3 USAMs with Justin. Actually did Q school with him at the end of Jordan's rookie year, 2nd stage, and Jordan dropped out of Texas to turn pro at the end of 2012, and he says he couldn't find any caddy, and so I was kind of in by default. And here we are 12 years later, still caddying for Jordan. So,
do you remember your first professional round together?
My first ever round with him, actually he was an AM, as far as on the PGA Tour, was at the US Open at Olympic Club. 2012 he qualified. It was my second to last week of the school year. He was 4th alternate. Paul Casey withdrew. He got Paul Casey's spot, and he was paired with Bill Haas, who had won the FedEx the year before, and then Nick Watney, who'd won like 2 tournaments the year before. So he was in like one of the featured pairings, and I mean, I had absolutely no clue then. I still question if I do now. So that was my first. That was, you know, that was a bucket list experience for me.
Yeah.
Just that week alone.
And are you like, do you have a sub in your class that week?
Yeah. So I had. Luckily, my principal was a big sports guy, and he, you know, he knew the U.S. Open, you know, how big a deal that was.
Yeah.
And he was great. So I took the week without pay, but you know, making the sub plans actually was more work than the actual caddying. You know, 5 days of lessons for, you know, a bunch of 6th graders.
Right. What goes into the prep week in and week out? And I know you said maybe you have these for years, like coming back to each week, or like.
Yeah,
so,
well, unfortunately, I lost my book from last year.
Right.
I put a lot
Sorry
of
to bring
time
it up.
but basically, the 4 majors, the Players, East Lake, the bigger tournaments. I spend a lot of time on the greens, as do a lot of caddies, and I'm trying to find where all the straights are to where I think the pins are going to be. So I put a lot of time into that. Typically, you get to the tournament Sunday night, and then Mondays. Jordan's a grinder. He works hard, really hard, and so he'll sometimes play 9 on Monday. Usually it's, call it 3 or 4 hours of practice with him, and then I'll go walk at least 9. You know, I'm getting a lot of work on the par 5s, on layups if you miss the fairways, and then, you know, wherever. Basically, it was sunrise to sunset the first 2 days here this week.
Yeah.
Just trying to cram it all in, and Augusta is my favorite week to work. I mean, it's crazy. It's like you're getting paid to go work at Augusta, and 12 years ago I won the lottery to go there as a patron.
Oh my gosh.
I was teaching and did the lottery like everybody does, and I won 4 badges to Tuesday, and that was 2012. And so it was like, you know, that was my golden ticket. And then 2 years later, Jordan's leading, and in the final pairing, he was leading with 10 holes to go by 2.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, he wins it. So it all happened, you know, really fast.
Yeah.
So anytime I'm working there, it's just, in my mind, I just go back to, it wasn't that long ago that, you know, I won the golden ticket just getting to go there. So it's fun to work at places like that, and you know, you go to these iconic courses, St. Andrews, and this year we're at Pinehurst for the U.S. Open, and Valhalla's, you know, an awesome course. And so yeah, you're out there grinding, putting time, but it's fun, and you're with other caddies. This week there was 3 or 4 guys that, there's a lot of really hard working caddies. There's just too much at stake now for the players, and so, you know, you got to step up your caddy game too. And I mean, I've noticed just this is my 12th year caddying, the level, the quality of caddying's greatly increased, and just I mean, if you're not great at your job, you're not going to last.
Yeah. I often ask players who their favorite people to be paired with. Do you have favorite caddies you like to be paired with?
Favorite caddies? I mean, I love being out with Bones. He's just easy to be around. He's, you know, low key, stays out of the way. You know, guys like that. Joe LaCava, same thing. I like being out with Big Money, Austin Kaiser, Griner's. I'm worried Griner's actually going to take my guy, because those two. I always tell Jordan and Joe, I'm like, you trying to get my job, Griner? Like, you guys are always flirting with each other. And, but Joe Griner is awesome. He's, you know, I think a top 5 caddy in our profession. Just how he talks to Max, and you know, I learned a lot listening to these guys and observing these guys, and I try to, especially my first, call it 3 or 4 years. I mean, I really had no clue how to caddy.
Yeah.
I mean, I understood Jordan, and I understood golf a little bit, but as far as being a tour caddy, I mean, you're constantly having to learn and evolve, and you know, the golf courses change, and so watching caddies like Bones, LaCava, Griner, and just how they navigate a golf course with their player, it's I think it's wise to pay attention to guys like that.
So on that line, this is kind of a 2-part question. I don't know if you're even aware of this. Like, when you and Jordan have these back and forths, it goes super viral, always. Are you guys aware of that even?
I mean, you kind of sense it.
People love it.
Yeah.
But my question, I'll hear him say, like, this one's on me. Like, how do you know in those moments whether you need to push or back off? Because for all of us, we're like, oh, this is like a movie that we're watching. But for you, it must be kind of hard. Maybe you just got
I mean, I've got, if you look at my yardage book, I mean, there's a lot of different notes in there. So you're trying to process. I tell people there's like in each golf shot, there's like 7 or 8 things that are going into each shot. And then you got to take into account, you know, what's your player thinking? You know, does he have adrenaline? Is he nervous? Is he not focused? Is he too confident? You got to really get a gauge for where they're at. There was a shot last week at Bay Hill. If you look at the data, it says to hit driver. And I could tell, Jordan asked, you know, what's it call 4-on-1. And I was like, well, the stats say driver. But I could tell he wasn't comfortable with it. And so he ended up hitting hybrid, and he hit it in the right rough, but he said later, he's like, I'm glad I hit hybrid, because if I hit a driver, it'd have been out of bounds. And so you got to be really perceptive as to what your guy's thinking. And for me, I'm very lucky, because Jordan's very, wears his emotions on his sleeve, which is great for all of you. It's also great for me.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I think most caddies would say, I would rather, you want to know what your guy's thinking.
Right.
And Jordan does a great job of communicating what he's thinking, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
And so for me, it gives me a good gauge of kind of when to back off. You're always trying to, as a caddy, you're always trying to protect from, danger, call it that. And my guy, there's not a golf shot that he thinks he can pull off every golf shot in the world. Probably more than anybody on planet Earth, including, if he's on a cliff and about to fall off, like, he's like, I'm going to hit this shot.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing usually, and once in a while it doesn't work out, and you live with it. You'd rather caddy for a guy that is fearless than who's scared.
So I asked Bones this, and kind of just going through your past decade and more caddying, is there any like mistake that, if you think of like your mistakes as a caddy, that kind of sticks out?
Probably say at 15, St. Andrews, like for me, that was the hardest loss of his. A caddy once told me that the better the player you work for, the more great wins you're going to have, and the more tough losses you're going to have. And you want to work for the greats, and you're going to have those tough losses. And St. Andrews, that was a tough one, because he had won the first 2 majors that year, and he was tied for the lead with 2 holes to go. And he missed a short putt on 17 and 18. If I had to redo, he ended up hitting a gap wedge. He was left, and he was being aggressive because he was trying to make birdie there on the 18th hole at St. Andrews, and he ended up coming up a pace short and came all the way back down to the bottom, and he had to make a 40-footer to get in the playoff. But in hindsight, I wish he would have hit it to 20 feet behind it. It was a tough shot if he would have hit the pitching wedge, but I actually cried after that one. I was so upset, and not just that decision. And he never said anything.
Yeah.
He wasn't like, why didn't we hit this one more club? He wanted to be aggressive too. But that one, it was just, like, he was on the cusp of having a great chance to literally win the first 3 majors. And then he ended up getting solo second at Whistling Straits that year at the PGA.
Yeah.
He was not far off from winning all 4 majors. So that's probably one that I think about.
So a lot of top players travel with their families and stuff. What is it like as a caddy? I can't, like, you're in Washington, based out of Washington. I don't, like, when do you get to see your family? Is it just weeks off? Do they come out?
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate. I get over half the year off.
Yeah.
And I get to be with my family. I have a 6- and a 4-year-old with my wife. It's, the weeks at home I get to go volunteer in both my kids' classes. And, I do that once or twice a week when I'm home.
Wow.
What do you get to do drop off. I lead a reading group in Mrs. Jefferson's class.
Love it.
I do pull out little reading assessments here and there. I do a little bit of math. And I actually told her that my kindergartner's teacher, like, I forgot how, like, the intensity of being a teacher and just the, just the nonstop decision. Like, I was rusty.
Do you see any parallels between caddying and teaching?
I think teaching is way harder than caddying.
Okay.
It's trying to manage, and his class there's 18 kids, but when I was teaching 6th grade, it was 28, 30 kids, and it's a very, you got a wide set of needs, academically, socially, and I have the highest respect for teachers. And my daughter's class, it's, I did a read aloud the week before I was home, got to read to them, and so stuff like that's just like, I get that in spades, which I can't get enough of it.
That's awesome. Just a few more here. Do you have a favorite memory with some of your caddy pals?
Favorite? The team events are always the best. I've been very fortunate to work for Jordan. He's been on 5 Ryder Cups. The Ryder Cups, I think the 2016 Ryder Cup at Hazeltine, that was probably my favorite just week with caddies. Just caddies, the wives, the players. we had never won, you know, had not been a part of a winning Ryder Cup. We got our butts kicked in 2014. And so 2016, it was just a really fun mix of caddies. And, you know, it's a little more like at nighttime. I normally will never have a drink on the road. And that week, you know, you have a few vodka sodas and you kind of hang out with the boys in the team room. And, you know, we're not going wild. I mean, we do Sunday night. Sunday night, win or lose. It's a blast on Sunday nights, no matter what happens. And, I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie between both teams, I would say, you know, once you get off the course. But yeah, the team events, I mean, everyone's just even better than you can imagine.
I bet. Favorite memory with Jordan?
Favorite memory with Jordan, I would probably say Chambers Bay, the U.S. Open. That U.S. Open's why I became a caddy. I never really wanted to be a caddy, but I wanted to work at that U.S. Open. And when Chambers opened in 07, they actually announced before they ever opened up that they were going to host the U.S. Open 8 years later. And it was my caddy dream to work for somebody that week. And I thought it was going to be a college kid or a qualifier. That was, you know, I thought I was going to be a teacher still and just work that week. I got married at Chambers Bay. My school was a mile from Chambers Bay. It's where I learned how to caddy. And Jordan actually didn't, when he played the USAM there in 2010, he missed the cut and kind of had a bad taste in his mouth. He actually joked that, well, he just said it was a bad course for him. I'll just say that.
Fair enough.
And, so my whole goal that week was to get him to fall in love with Chambers Bay. And, you know, so I went from thinking just somehow work that week to all of a sudden I'm caddying for the guy that just won the Masters and is one of the favorites. And then he decides to win that week. He ends up, you know, that was a dramatic one.
Yeah, yep.
I think the most clutch putt he's ever made was on 16 there along the water on the Puget Sound. And if I had to sing just one single favorite moment, it was probably that putt he made on 16. And just thinking back to 8 years prior, you know, having been there when the course opened to my guy just made a putt to go up by 3. And then he doubled the next, and it was like, whoa, wake up, you know, this thing's not over yet.
Right.
And then the 2 shots he hit on 18 were just a joke. They were so Jordan, just clutch, perfect drive, a perfect 3-wood that he talked a lot to while the ball was in the air. Lagged it up there, makes the putt. But that week overall, you know, all my family, it was Father's Day. My dad was still alive then, you know, to celebrate that with all my family, my wife, my dad in particular, and Jordan. I mean, he was still number 2 in the world, but you know, he'd won the first 2 majors in dramatic fashion. So that was definitely I put that number 1, which people would be surprised. They would think the Masters or the Open, but I think it's just because of
family. And everything.
Living there.
So we do this thing at when I'm home with my siblings every night at dinner. We say our low of the day, our high of the day, and something that we learned just to get, you know, conversation going.
I like
You've
that.
kind of shared a little bit. Yeah, you've shared a little bit, but if you're looking back on your whole career as a caddy, maybe something else that stands out. You kind of went over the lowest, but maybe another high, and then something you just learned along the way.
I would say probably the other high would definitely be the Open he won at Birkdale. Coming off of, he had, you know, that Masters in 16, that was a tough one. And the next time he was in that position again was less than a year later. Chaos happens at Birkdale, and he was so calm and so cool on 13 there when he hit the foul ball. And for him to ask the question, you know, is this driving range in play? And it was. And most time driving range is, you know, it's OB, so he was able to take an unplayable, go back to the driving range. But the fact that he was thinking so clearly, we had a long exchange there about what club to hit, and he ends up making a bogey there. And then the last 5 holes, I mean, Johnny Miller called it the greatest finish in the history of major golf. I mean, he almost aced 14. The go get that putt from 50 feet on.
I made that into like t-shirts.
15, 16, he makes a 25-footer, 17, he birdies. and all of a sudden he's got a 2-shot lead on 18. And to do that, kind of on the back end of the last major being a kind of a bad taste in his mouth, I think shows just the grit that Jordan has. And I mean, he's just always going to have that, and his self-belief. I'd say as far as just things I've learned along the way, it's probably just being humble and just a sense of humility, and Jordan models that really well. He hasn't changed one bit since when I met him when he was 17. You know, I mean, he's made a very good living. He's, you know, very recognizable, but he treats people the exact same. And just, you know, not having an ego, and yeah, just being humble. And this game humbles you as a caddy and certainly as a player too. And just recognizing that, you know, we're pretty fortunate to do what we do and go to the best courses in the world and be around the best players. And, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, it's a blessing.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining me. This
Thanks
was great.
for hosting. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching The Scoop. I hope you all enjoyed it. Make sure to hit that subscribe button because we have a lot of fun guests coming your way.